All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Loft. If you have not yet, please like, comment, subscribe. We just reached our goal of 1,000. I'm super excited to see what's to come. If you're new, welcome. If you are not new, thanks for tuning back in.
What's your advice to someone who is lost?
The opposite of addiction is connection, and I could never do this thing on my own.
I've been working since I was a kid. I just gotta keep my head.
That you're responsible for and that your name's attached to, do you feel like that gave you that responsibility to be better than you were? When you believe in yourself a little bit, you'd be surprised what could happen.
Yeah, I got them fed for real, running around, but I'm the passenger now, cause Jesus don't cut them.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is on a mission to meet 10,000 people for 1 hour each. You may have seen him on some of today's biggest media shows, such as The Kelly Clarkson Show. Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Lawless, AKA Rob's 10K Friends. What's up, man? How you doing?
How's it going, man?
Good. We're filming currently the day after the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So my voice is a little shot. Energy is a little low. But granted, I'm so happy that you're here. And thank you for coming. I appreciate it. We interrupt this episode to give a shout out to our sponsor for this episode. Been cooking since he was a kid. Nick Safaldi went to culinary school, out of high school, was in and out of restaurants, and realized he hated working for someone else, not being able to make his own food. He decided to take a few years off from cooking, started construction and painting, and then COVID hit. Once COVID hit, it made him realize he wanted to start his own business. So as a result, he started cooking out of his parents' house on Blaze Street. When he decided to pick up and grow bigger, he moved into Celtic Cross. Once again, I want to give a huge shout out to Blaze Street Cafe for sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, thank you. These things, you just get back in the flow, move forward.
Exactly. Just push, no days off.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So you met my videographer, Dylan Miles.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing you around social media, and I really wanted to have you on because your concept is very interesting, and I wanted to dive deeper into it. And I know we're meeting each other for the first time. So just curious, how many people have you met so far? Like, what number am I?
Oh, that's a good question. I should know this off the top of my head. I think you're 5,448.
Wow.
It's definitely 5440 something, but I think it's 5448.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So obviously right off the bat, where are you from?
So I am from Norristown, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So if you're not familiar, it's like King of Prussia area.
Okay, yeah.
Like 40 minutes outside the city. Grew up there, same house my whole life.
Yeah.
Parents still live there. That's
Cool.
where I watched the Super Bowl this weekend.
Yeah.
But now I live in Fairmount in Philadelphia.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't, tuned in before, this is Rob's 10K Friends. He is on a mission to meet 10,000 people, and I did a bit of research, and I know you would genuinely enjoy the connection of connecting with somebody, and not so much about like you mentioned like kind of car you drive or whatever, like you're just genuinely connecting with a person one-on-one after just meeting them. So he's on a mission to do that. You've been doing a lot of stuff. You've been on a lot of media outlets. You've been getting a lot of news coverage. So where did this start, and where did this idea come about, and why did it come about?
Sure. So I went to Penn State.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest of three in my family. My sister went there. My brother went there. So when I got there, I had the benefit of knowing kind of what to get involved in.
Yeah.
Because I had a different path than both of them, but my sister said you should join the Penn State Dance Marathon and do specifically morale committee. So there are a bunch of outgoing people.
Right.
Did that, made a lot of friends through that, and then through one of those guys, I became a tour guide for prospective students. So it's called Line Ambassadors. It's a very tightly knit group of people that like to party together and then like to like be the face of the university together. So I joined that. I joined a fraternity that was restarting spring of my freshman year.
Okay.
And then I would do Habitat for Humanity trips over spring breaks.
Nice.
And I was homecoming captain going like junior into senior year. So every year it was like I had a new circle of friends to add to my network. And when I graduated, it felt like that authentic, organic connection just went away. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I studied finance. I graduated 2013, so you launch into the real world, and it feels like everything is agenda-driven. And it feels like no one really... I think there's this misconception that everyone's friend groups are set in stone, or that they're not open to meeting new people.
Yes.
And I think as we go through our 20s, our 30s, etc., people still do want to meet new people. They just don't know how to go about it.
Absolutely, and I agree with that 100% because when you're starting off in grade school, high school, like you kind of build your friends, and then when college happens, you kind of are thrown into a place where you have to make your own decisions. You start to figure out who you are, and a lot of times your friend groups are sort of already made up, and And people are afraid of meeting new people. There's like this saying of no new friends type things. And, you know, when you're in the real world and you're connecting, like you're not connecting with someone based on status in high school or based on status in college. Now it's more so because of how you actually feel, connect with the person. I've actually been kind of going through that myself. You know, even like on having this podcast, when I connect with people, you know, you realize people come from different backgrounds and people you may not have known in high school, but now you know each other, and it's just, you know, it's a genuine connection, you know. But so why did you, so you started this, when, like, what was the day you started, hey, listen, I want to meet 10,000 people. Why 10,000 people?
So I graduated and started doing consulting for Deloitte out of school.
Okay.
And I feel like I was taking all of the steps you're supposed to step.
Yeah.
I met a girl 3 weeks before we graduated. We started dating, and then I was like doing the Deloitte thing.
Yeah.
The program that I was part of, it was you do 2 years as a consultant, 2 years as an analyst, 1 as a consultant, and then they pay for you to get your MBA full time for 2 years. So
Okay.
I thought I was going to be on that track, but like 2 months in, I realized I don't want to do this for the next 40 years until retirement. I wasn't really wanting to make it to partner, which
Right.
is kind of like what you're supposed to do in that
Right.
field.
Yeah.
And I had minored in entrepreneurship, so
Oh, wow. Okay.
I wanted to do my own thing in life. And at Penn State, there were these 3 guys that started a company called Weebly. It's kind of like Squarespace.
Sounds familiar. Yeah. It sounds really familiar, actually.
So basically, like drag and drop, create your own website, and they sold that company for $350 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they would bring their friends back to Penn State, and they would do a startup week, and they, when always talking about creating your own companies, they'd be like, you have to learn to code. You have to learn to code, learn the tech side.
Right.
And I was just way on the social side of things. So shortly into my time at Deloitte, I was like, what can I do that would be my thing? And I was missing that sense of community that I had at Penn State at the time.
Right.
So I was like, how do I recreate this in my life? And I thought, well, if I meet 10,000 people, that would be a pretty cool journey to go on. And initially, I thought I was going to do 10 minutes with each person and do it in 1 year. And
Yeah.
I don't know what my plan was after that.
Yeah.
It was just, I was being naive because I was 23, 24 at the time.
So you started when you were 23.
So I had the idea in January of 2014, which I think at that time I was 23, and I just sat in my iPhone notes, and I left Deloitte. I went to a tech startup in Philly. I was on 13th and Chestnut, and when I was working there, I moved into Northern Liberties with 2 buddies from Penn State.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, Philly is my new campus. I can meet people here like I met people at Penn State. And that idea came back into my mind. And I was like, I'm going to start reaching out to people for this. So September 2015, I started reaching out to people.
Okay.
And the first person I met was November 11th of 2015. Okay. So it took a couple months just to get one person to be like, yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah. So what, people initially weren't like about it? They were kind of like, why are you doing this?
I think I didn't even get a lot of rejection. There were a couple of people that were like, yeah, no, this isn't for me.
And
but
so were you reaching out to random people? Like,
yeah.
Really? So
Yeah.
what was that process, like the selection process of like starting off? Because you didn't start off with just like your friends, right? You start off with random people.
All new people, yeah. Because it was, for me, it was a way to meet new people.
Right.
So I would find people on Instagram, just like photographers or whatever, people that didn't have big followings or anything like that, but they were doing stuff that I thought was interesting.
Cool.
Like street artists,
Right.
photographers, artists. The first person I met was, he ran a website called billypen.com.
Okay.
And they had this who's next list, like who's next in the music scene, who's next in the art scene or the political scene.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool, there's a list of all the people that I'm going to reach out to. And I worked in sales at the time, so I was used to finding people's emails and sending them messages and asking for their time. So that wasn't weird for me.
Yeah.
So I would just shoot them a message, and if I didn't hear back, I would follow up until I did hear back. And I also Googled Philadelphia artists, and there's a site called inliquid.com.
Okay.
And it's just like Philly artists. So I looked at the art that I thought was interesting, and if I liked their art, I would shoot them an email. And that was how I found a few of the first people. And then it was just kind of word of mouth where I would tell people, hey, I'm doing this thing. And they'd be like, oh, you know who you should meet is this person.
Right, like a one after the other type.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you start to get that momentum shift for you? When did you start to pick up after, getting the first few people? When did people start saying, you should go meet this person, or actually, you know what, I've been wanting to meet you?
Yeah. Very early on, people would say you should meet this person as well, but I was reaching out mainly to everyone up until like 65 people. And I only know that number because one woman that I met was like, you should talk to my friend Josh. He's a writer for the Philadelphia Citizen. Maybe he would do an article on you. So I talked to Josh, and he did do an article on me. And so I started the project November 11th of 2015.
Yeah.
This was like May of 2016, so 7 months later.
Okay.
And so he wrote an article on me. It did really well. And then, what was it? Geekadelphia was like a local blog that covered tech people.
Yep.
Since I was in the tech scene, they did a story on me. Technically Philly also works with the tech scene because I worked at a startup. They did an article on me. And PHL 17 did a TV story on me that ran at like 5 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Like, no one was watching it. But all that stuff happened. It all came out June of 2016, and then the tech startup that I worked for was acquired that month. Well, technically July of 2016, so I was laid off at the end of June.
Oh, wow.
So I had met 100 people. I had just started getting this press, and like people were just starting to reach out to me, and suddenly I had all this time to dedicate to the project. So I actually dove into it full time that month, July of 2016. And haven't looked back. The last time I worked for a different company was June of 2016.
So are you virtual now? So you've met people from 90 different countries. So what's the main difference you found, meeting people from these different cultures? Like, what is something significant you've noticed in meeting them?
I think that the significant thing that I've noticed is that we're more similar than different, which sounds cliche, but... So now the way that I make money is I do speaking engagements at like conferences and corporations and stuff. And in 2019, I wrote this article, How to Meet 12 New People in 2019, because I just wanted people to have a goal. Like, they could meet people like I have my goal to meet 10,000. And I posted it on Reddit, and someone said, you should share this to the subreddit Social Skills. So I posted it there, and then someone had a comment, and they were like, the way you talk about conversation reminds me of the Ford framework of conversation. Right. And it stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And I've just thought a lot about that since I saw that comment, because I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Every single person has a family dynamic. We all have an occupation to pay the bills. We all have hobbies outside of work, and we all have dreams of where we want to go with our life. And as I've talked to people from different countries, like people from Iran, for example, I think is really interesting, because the start of 2020, if you remember, it was like World War III, U.S.-Iran. And then fast forward like 4 months, and I'm talking to these people because we're like, well, what's COVID like where you are? And as I'm talking to them, they're like, yeah, like my parents put pressure on me to pursue this particular type of field or whatever, or to get married by this age. And they're like, I love the show Friends. And you're like, it's just like copy and paste of my experience to your experience.
Right, just different places.
Yeah.
You mentioned, having dreams and, occupations. What was your goal? Your goal was to be in tech, but transitioning now, what's your goal now what's your dream now for an occupation? And what do you want to be doing with your life?
Well, I think my dream, when I decided that I wanted to meet 10,000 people one-on-one for an hour each, that then became my definition of success. Because in a way, it was like I set this daunting goal for myself. People thought it was weird in the beginning, and then it kind of switched to where people thought it was intriguing, and then people thought it was inspiring. So now my goal is I just want to complete the thing that I said I was going to do. But alongside that, now that I'm making money as a speaker, I really want to succeed in that field too. Like, it's good for me to be able to support myself. It's good for me to share a message of intentional connection for people. And it's like a game in a way. Like, Jalen Hurts, I love his mindset. And last year I read Kobe Bryant's biography, and like this year I was like, oh, I want to be like the Michael Jordan of speaking. And I was like, no, I want to be the Kobe Bryant of speaking. Like, I want to put in the work to be really good in that field, so that when people are looking for someone to hire, they're like, this dude does a really good job.
Right.
He's going to leave our audience feeling inspired. So I want to do really well in that field. And then after I complete the goal, I think it'd be cool to be a professor at a university and teach a course where first-year students pair off one-on-one every class period and learn from each other's backgrounds rather than a textbook or a PowerPoint slide.
I like that.
Yeah.
You can actually learn a lot from speaking to another person.
Exactly, yeah. And you've seen it, I'm sure, through your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And What are some things you picked up from reading that book about Kobe Bryant?
Well, I didn't know how like focused he was, I guess. Like, people were like, he was an asshole. Like, he didn't get along with his teammates. He wasn't really like, because I looked at him and was like, yeah, people love him. Like, it didn't seem like people loved him. He was just so focused on his game that he almost forgot to do the social part of things. But then you go, like, one of the best things I learned was, because he was drafted right straight out of high school. And I think it was his rookie season, it was like the first time that he had the chance to be the star. I think they were playing the Utah Jazz or something like this. You have to fact check me on this, but he got like the shot at the end of the game to win the game for them, and he airballed it and totally missed it. And then they went into overtime, and he had a couple more opportunities where he had the chance to be the hero and to win the game, and he airballed those shots, and he missed it. And they were like, Kobe, how does it feel that you had the opportunity to be the hero, to win the game, and you missed it? Like, what do you think people are going to say? And he was like, fuck them. No one else is going to take the shot.
Right.
So, and I was like, damn, that's crazy. Because you think about us, I feel like we can be like, oh, if I screw up this opportunity, then I'm screwed. I'm never going to be able to...
You don't ever want to take that shot again.
...succeed in my field. Yeah, or like for me with speaking, I'm like, oh, if I get nervous and I do a bad job, I'm never going to have the opportunity to prove myself again. And it's like, if Kobe Bryant can become Kobe Bryant after missing and airballing 3 shots when he had the chance to be the hero, like, you can get back up again and keep going.
And if you read through the lines, he always mentions how much time, and even the people around him mention how much time he puts in before the game and after the game.
Yeah.
And it leads to us seeing those shining moments because of the preparation in the background. So if you're failing and, you know, not playing well, or you're not doing, or you're not speaking well or properly the way you wish you could have.
Yeah.
If you just take that piece that the whole world doesn't see, and you can apply it and learn from it, and then eventually people are going to see that one succeeding moment. Maybe for you, it's that one talk you give. For me, it's that one DJ set that I play. We're like, wow, he's really good.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that you have all these other mistakes in the past that you've learned from each time. And kind of reminding myself that too, either whether it's in like my podcast journey, my DJing journey, or anything that I'm doing. It's like, my failures can't define me. They just need to be something you learn from, you know?
And you're defined by the inputs.
Yeah.
Like the shots you're putting up in the gym in practice. And that's a big focus for me this year. Is I'm not so focused on the outputs of how many gigs am I getting or what does my social media look like. I'm focused on the inputs of how many other speeches am I watching to study the film?
Right.
How many conferences am I reaching out to? How many people am I prospecting? So. And
you speak so that's your job now, is to speak.
Yeah. So in the last 2 years, I did my very first paid speech April of 2021. And I've done 31 paid speeches to date. So.
How'd you get started doing that?
I met a girl in August of 2019 named Michelle Poehler, who was introduced to me through a guy that I met in Philly very early on. He was part of my project, and when I moved to Hoboken, he was like, you should talk to my friend Michelle. So I met her in Brooklyn, and she was like, yeah, I do speaking. I started speaking 3 years ago, and long story short, she was like, now my average rate is $17,000 per speech, and I'm speaking 70 times this year.
Let's do the math here. The quick math.
Yeah, so I did it. It's before agency fees and taxes. It's 1.3 million. And I think after agency fees and taxes, it's probably like 700,000. Wow. So her husband quit his job to manage her full time.
It's amazing.
They now have built they didn't build it. They have their dream home in Miami, and she's had like her whole social media journey of decorating it and stuff.
That's amazing.
The more I dove into that field, so actually, Dylan and I bonded over our love of The Buried Life. If you've ever seen that, it was a show on MTV back in 2010, 2011. It was about these 4 guys that would go around on an RV, and they would check items off their bucket list, and for every item they checked off their list, they would help a stranger check an item off theirs. So one of the guys from that group speaks about that journey now. And he's charging up to $30,000 per speech and did
That's
150 keynotes last year.
That's crazy.
So once I learned how, because there's two sides of it. There's just the lucrative side of it, and then there's the impact side of it. And for me, it's enjoyable to start sharing this experience outside of just my one-on-one interactions and start facilitating connection amongst other people.
Absolutely.
But yeah, then there's the fact that I can also make sure I can afford groceries for the first time in 6 years, and that's been a pretty peaceful transition.
Yeah. Have you had any hardships as like your on your come up? I know because you're educated and you have a job, so I can't imagine you struggled that much. I'm sure financially. If I'm wrong.
I just had to be really strategic about it. I made a lot of sacrifices in terms of like the life milestones. A lot of my friends are married and working on their first kids now.
Yeah.
I've put like, I'm just starting to get back into dating, which doesn't bother me. It's just like a different schedule.
Yeah. So I was going to ask too, has that not been a priority to you? Because considering how your career, you're starting to build, is that I'm sure family life, and is that not a priority to you at this point?
I mean, my family that I have is a huge priority for me, but yeah, like I'm starting to get back into it.
Right.
The issue was, so when I was laid off, I had 11 months left on my lease in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished that out, and then I knew I couldn't afford to rent and continue doing this full time.
Right.
So my roommate from Penn State was like, hey, if you want to come live with me in Los Angeles, I have an extra bedroom in my apartment. You can crash with me as long as you need to. So I drove across the country. I lived in LA for the summer of 2017.
Oh, wow.
Wasn't paying rent. And then I went back to my parents' house for 5 months. Then I went back to LA for 9 months.
That's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
I was in there now. I lived in LA in 2018.
Okay. We were there together. But I was back at home in Philly, and then I was back for 3 months in 2019. And then back in Philly, and then I stayed with my friend and his wife in Hoboken for 9 months.
You plan on staying in Philly? Like that area?
Yeah, I like being in Philly. My brother lives in New York City. I could see myself being there.
East Coast. Okay.
Yeah, northeast
Yeah.
for sure.
So you mentioned living in Philly, and we talked for a second about Jalen Hurts. What do you think of Jalen Hurts and his mindset as a young quarterback in the NFL?
I think he's awesome. I think his mind is like a steel trap.
Yeah.
He's so stoic, and I think my brother and I were talking about this on Sunday or Saturday, because I feel like one of the things I've always liked about him is he just puts his head down and is like, I'll do the work. Like, I'll do the work in the off season. Yep. And even if you saw when he fumbled, what did he do? He came right back down the field and scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
And I feel like his mental strength is one of the things that I admire most about him. And it's weird because I'm 32. And then you look at someone like him and you're like, oh, he's definitely older than me. You know,
he's above his years.
Yeah.
Well beyond his years. And it's funny, I was DJing the game at a FOP. It's a spot in the Northeast. And I was watching the game, and once that happened, the fumble happened, I'm like, I want to see how he responds.
Yeah.
I want to see how he attacks it. And like you said, he came back and scored a touchdown. You watched the game. Like, what was your thoughts on watching the game? What are your feelings now about the Super Bowl and the Eagles as a team?
I mean, I'm proud of them. I feel a little bit depressed.
Yeah, they were the top team in the league, and it's a tough game, but it's always next year.
I think we'll compare it to the Phillies. That was really exciting because we didn't think we were going to be in that position.
Yeah, exactly.
And here the expectation was to win, and
right.
I think I'm hurting more so now because I was confident that we were going to win.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, if we lost the 2018 Super Bowl, I think that would have been crushing. But since we got one, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
We got our one, but still, I was listening to the radio yesterday, and they were like, we want for the kids, like the next generation, to not have to grow up in that mindset of, well, we're the Philly teams, we always lose on the big stage.
Right.
And I didn't want that, and it did. And
yeah, there's a lot to learn though, and especially having a young core. We'll be back, you know, and it's tough because the 2018 was a fever dream. It was lightning in a bottle, and there was something super magical about it. And I spoke a lot about it, even like coming up, like to the game. I was like, you know what? Like in 2018, we weren't supposed to be there, and we ended up winning. And this year, we're supposed to be there. So we all felt very confident. And I think like this game kind of showed like you never know what can happen. Having our Philly teams, right? We've been spoiled, but also not spoiled, where we had our MLS team go to the championship. We had the Phillies go to the World Series, and we had the Eagles go to the Super Bowl. And losing all three of them, it's a tough feeling. Mm. How does Rob bounce back from any of the losses you've had in your life? When you've been at the top and you've had, your success, whether you've been on the Kelly Clarkson show or any type of news outlet, in your failures, how have you been able to bounce back, and what is your mindset on bouncing back after a failure?
Yeah, I think that's why I am increasingly admiring the Kobe Bryants, the Jalen Hurts, and like the mental side for them, because I try to be that way in my life. And I talk about a lot. I'm constantly going through cycles of confidence and doubt in my life, and I'll have a really great speech and feel very confident, and then a week later I'll feel very doubtful about my path. And I think anyone who is a creator, who's in the driver's seat of their path, is going to feel that way. So for me, the way that I manage it is I don't attach myself to the emotion. I attach myself to the action. So the action for me is I try to meet 3 people every single day through my project. And what I've noticed through the last 7 years is if I'm high, I'm always going to be low in the future. If I'm low, I'm always going to be high in the future. So I don't get stuck in wasting energy on that current emotion. I stick to the action of, well, I'm going to go out tomorrow and I'm going to meet 3 people. And I'm going to go out the next day and meet 3 people. And if I do that action, whatever needs to happen with my project is going to happen. So I manage it by doing the action and staying in the middle instead of getting too high or too low.
Do you always, I know for myself too, you have those moments, like even like today, Eagles lost, could have easily been like, I don't feel great today, whatever. But, do you think about your why? Does that help you as well? I know for me personally, like whenever I'm struggling or mentally, I'm kind of maybe doubting myself, I think about my why and the people that this podcast means to, or the podcast means to certain people, or with whether it's like me maybe not feeling great to go out to Kensington on Thursday to give out food, like you kind of think about more of your why. Is that something you also think about?
I think so a little bit. I think I just think about when it comes to my project, the overall path in general. Kind of like that phrase, like you didn't come this far to come this far. So with and I've always understood that if I don't get up and do stuff, the project stays still. Right. Like it's not like a company where if you have an off day, the company around you is still going. And
right. It's Rob's 10K friend. It's not anyone else's.
Yeah. So I've always been keenly aware of that accountability, and that has motivated me to move forward. But then especially for the people that I'm meeting too, I don't take that lightly. Like people are going to take time out of their day to be part of this thing that I just made up in my mind. Right. It would be a disservice to them if I didn't show up and enjoy our time together.
Right. And so what has been your favorite part about meeting these people? Is there something, an overlying, concept or overlying idea or thought? Because I can't ask you the specific person that's like, because that's crazy. You met so many people. Overall, what is something that's really stood out to you meeting all these people?
I think talking about our whys, I couldn't put it into words until like within the last year, but I believe that every human interaction has the potential to change your life, no matter how brief.
I agree 100%.
And I see that time and time again through my project, and I think you probably have a better understanding of that than the average person. And I feel like I've seen it through my project, because I think if you say something like that, people in their mind think, oh, okay, well, this person has to introduce me to the love of my life, or they have to introduce me to this job offer that's going to be like winning the lottery. Yeah. When in reality, they could introduce you to a new artist who changes the way that you spend your time because you listen to that artist for 20 hours of the next few weeks. Or they tell you about, for me, what happens a lot, I meet people who have lost loved ones or who've lost like siblings or parents, and it's a constant reminder of the fact that I still have mine. And for me, that's life-changing. Or today, where I was sulking about the Eagles, and a girl that I had met from Turkey DMs me on Instagram, and she's like, hey, can you share some fundraisers? Like, my friends are trying to find their parents in the rubble. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, and I'm sad about a Super Bowl loss.
Yep. It's perspective.
Yeah.
And like I said, I drop this every single episode, but my grandma gave me a very wise quote, and she said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about perspective. And it's
Yeah.
all about how you see the world and what your thoughts are on that specific thing. And I know that you mentioned how meeting a specific person can change your life. Also, I feel like it helps too, because it can not only unlock a relationship or a connection, but it can unlock something in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, me speaking to you, I could learn something about you, but it can also unlock something in myself. And I mentioned this on my did an episode. You know, I did all these episodes, and I think it was episode 74, 75. I did one on myself, on how the LOFT saved my life. And I sat in front of a camera right where you're sitting, and I just spoke to the camera for an hour. And, you know, I've reflected on all these experiences that I've had talking to these people and connecting with them and putting it out for the world to see, or at least, you know, my network to see. And I realized I never told people my story, and people, you know, I wanted to give people a reason to listen, not only for the guests, but also to listen to me or what I believe or what I think. Is I view myself as someone who wants to be somebody, you know. So it unlocked a lot in myself, and I learned a lot about myself just sitting and speaking to a camera, you know. And I just think that the idea of connection, human connection, and community, which is what you're building, it can save your life, and it can truly help everyone around you, you know. And speaking on mindset and you know, becoming the best version of yourself, I have to ask you, what are your thoughts on Andrew Tate and the things he talks about?
I to be honest, I haven't really dove into his stuff that much. I wouldn't say I have a favorable opinion of him. He's to me, he's almost like YouTube, like flashiness, stuff.
bigger.
And when I think of someone like him, I feel like I would love to have an hour with him and sit down and be like, tell me who you are. You know, 'cause I want to understand, like, why are you the way that you are? Because when I think about people for my project, and we often interact with each other so surface level, and you don't understand the depth of what people have been through that gets them to why they are the way they are now.
Yeah.
So I would just want to understand why he is that way, because I do feel like there's a lot of overcompensation, or I don't know. I get weary about people who are so sure of themselves, because what I've seen through my project is that the spectrum of life experiences is so wide that what I saw before I started my project was such a minute, you know, portion of it, such a small sample size.
Right.
So people who are so sure of themselves and so confident that have not done the work to expose themselves to people outside of their own experiences, I'm weary of them.
Yeah, that's actually a great observation. I'm actually pretty curious too. What are the significant differences you've noticed about people in general before your project and after / during your project? Are there anything, has your mind drastically changed on your idea of people since, you know, starting your project?
I think so. I do start to look at everyone as a friend, because, and I say this in my speeches, like, the more I interact with the depth of people, the more I acknowledge that it exists. And again, you might see this too, because if you're sitting with people and you're uncovering their story for an hour at a time, your mind is being trained to think about the depth of people rather than just your surface level emotions with them. And yeah, I do it 3 times a day. There's this thing called the Tetris effect, which is like, if you play Tetris for hours on end, people go to the grocery store and they start to say, oh, that box would fit there. They start to think in terms of Tetris.
Right.
And they say the same thing is true with your mindset. The more positive you see in the world, the more positive you look for and notice. Same with the negative side. So, yeah. And then the other thing is, in Philly, there are so many people who are like, oh, yeah, well, you met my friend, or you met my friend of my friend. And it's made me a better person, because I'm like, I don't want to be a jerk to someone knowing that I just met their friend and they're like, hey, he was one way this to me and a different way this way. So not that I was a jerk before, but it keeps you accountable, and it has helped me realize how connected we all are.
Yeah.
Again, cliche, but you actually really do see all of the connections that exist.
Yeah, it does, especially meeting 10,000 people, I'm sure. So who has been, and I guess I will ask this question thinking about it. Do you have a specific person / experience you've had with another human being that really stood out to you? Is there a specific person that comes to mind?
I have several of them. I met a girl December 30th. So what, a month and a half ago?
Yeah. It's around, a little over a month and a half, around a month and a half.
She's in the UK, but she was introduced to me through a girl that I met in person here in Philly. And she's 42 now, I think. But when she was 10, she was living in the UK, and her parents were like, well, we want to show you and your brother India, where our family comes from. So they took a flight over there, and then they were on a domestic flight in between two places in India, and the plane crashed. And her mom, her brother, and her dad all died.
Oh, wow.
And someone pulled her from the wreckage, and the next thing she remembered was waking up to her grandmother's voice. And she's like, well, that's weird because I know my grandmother is back home in the UK. So she had gone back to the hospital in the UK. She spent 4 months recovering there, burns all over her body. And she said that when they finally took her bandages off and gave her a mirror, she thought it was a prank because she was like, I was a prankster as a kid. She literally thought that someone drew a different face on her.
No, wow.
And then she said, then when she left the hospital is when the name calling started. And she said, like, people would cross the street if they saw her because they didn't want to catch whatever disease they thought she had.
Wow.
She said kids would throw things at her to see if she felt any emotion. And it's like, can you imagine losing your entire family in a plane crash only to spend 4 months in a hospital to go into a scenario where people treat you as some kind of monster? Like, and again, when I think about that stuff, it helps keep things in perspective. And it's like everything that I have been through in my life, whether it's been challenging, whether I've been feeling doubtful about gigs or if finances were tight, I've never overcome a challenge as big as she has.
Right. Yeah, and it's also important too to realize that everyone's, challenges, they're not all the same. But at the same time, everyone does have challenges. So,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's tough because you want to count your blessings. And also, someone losing their grandmom may hurt the same as someone losing their dad. Doesn't make, obviously, dad is very important. But, kind of understand where I'm getting at. It's like everyone has obstacles and challenges, It's just all about keeping perspective on what other people are going through and realize that, sometimes it might not be as bad as you think.
Yeah. It's all relative.
Exactly.
Too, and I think that's something with my I'm very much a person who will try to look at the bigger picture of things. I feel like that'll get me in trouble in the future with like a wife in a future argument or something like that.
Yeah. So you seem like a very well put together individual. And I wanted to ask, who do you look up to? Is there anyone you idolize or anyone you aspire to learn from or, for lack of a better term, be like?
I don't know if I have there are people in my life that I think are cool. Drake is like an easy...
Drake is the man, yeah.
I think that he's really interesting because I look up to like not his celebrity factor, but how long he's been able to maintain it.
Right, his longevity has been insane.
Yeah, and even coming from being a character on a TV show, like you have to be incredibly strategic to get from that to where he is today.
Right.
John Bellion is someone that I look up to.
Yo, Stupid Deep, it hits me so, dude. When I meet him, I'll cry if I meet him.
Yeah.
I think that song really helped me and changed my life.
Yeah, people always ask me like, who's one person that you want to meet? And he's always the person that I say, because something is going on in his mind musically that is not going on in other people's minds. Like if you watch his videos of how he creates his songs.
Just from scratch. Like he just feels the music. Those videos are insane. Like, because I sing and do music as well. And like, he was one of the first people I really watched, like when I started, like just seeing his creative process and to see how his love for music. I seen him in an interview talking about the song Stupid Deep, and I was at the gym and I came on And I was listening to the interview and you started crying about it, about the song and how much it's how true it is. You know what I mean? Like the love that you've always looked for can be in yourself. And that, dude, I get emotional thinking about it because like that song, I remember in the gym just crying like shit. Like, you know what I mean? We're on this planet trying to be somebody and like, you know, finding that love that love that we're all looking for can be in ourselves. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah. Billions, man.
Yeah, it's a great song. So yeah, music is my biggest passion aside from meeting people. So I'm always inspired by musicians, and I feel like they have always been a nice supplement to my journey of helping me mentally get through stuff. But yeah, and then I don't know, I think I have really good friends from Penn State. They've all been excelling in their fields. Like I look up to them on how to be a good parent or how to purchase a house. Or my friend TJ, who hosted me in Los Angeles, has been like number 2 at his company. He works at a commercial real estate company for years now. And he's been that way from a young age. So to see him have such a, like he's had to fire people, like people who are in like their 50s and stuff. And I don't know if I could ever do that. And then, yeah, my family, my sister and brother as well, and my parents. And I think that's been something that I've grown more into as I've gotten older with my project, is like the validation that I seek is not far, it's close. It's the people who are close to me. And I feel like people have to earn the right to have an opinion on me. Not that they do, like anyone can have an opinion on me, but
for it to mean something to you, they have
exactly
to earn it,
like
right?
My friend Nick, who has been my friend for over a decade, if he says, hey, what you're doing is cool or not cool, that means so much more to me than a random Instagram comment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of hate online?
No, thankfully.
Nice.
And I hope it stays that way.
Good for you. That makes one of us, the two of us. You know? So starting this project and meeting 10,000 people, what else have you learned? Anything new about yourself?
I think the learnings that I've had personally is gratitude. And again, that goes back to the family. It goes back to the fact that I was able to go, like I grew up in a loving family and I was encouraged to go to college, and my parents helped me fill out financial aid forms and stuff. And when I went to school, like I had that social experience because I was able to focus on school. I wasn't thinking about like my parents' divorce that was going on. My parents are still together, but you know what I mean? Like,
right, absolutely.
I wasn't thinking about family issues. My parents were able to keep a strong household together. And it allowed me to, and like not everyone has that benefit. So I learned a lot about that, and I learned a lot about discipline and consistency. A lot of people will comment on the consistency of my project. And I think that's really cool because I do try to show, I tell people like there are no days where I'm like, oh, I'm tired today, I'm not going to do this. It's just, again, it goes back to the action of that's what moves me forward. But yeah, I've learned that I'm disciplined, and I've learned that I'm consistent. And yeah, those are a few of them.
What are you most proud of about Rob's 10K, your project? What are you most proud of about it?
The fact that I am finally getting to a point where it's financially stable, because that, like, people didn't hate on me, but I know that there were, like, I remember walking out of church one time with my parents, and I think I was living with them at the time, which I've had to do multiple times throughout my journey. But a mom of a kid I went to grade school with was like, oh, I've heard about your 10,000 Friends project. It's interesting. And I was like, okay, cool. And another friend of mine, he was like, yeah, like I was talking to my parents or someone, they were like, oh, what's he going to do after the project? Like, he's going to meet 10,000 people, and then what? He set himself so far back, he's going to have to get an entry-level job, and he's not going to have experience. And I was always like, I don't even know why you would think in that way, that I would have to, that there would be no value in this process.
Small-minded people, man, and I hate to say it, but it's true. And you living in that hustle phase, we'll just say, and having to move back in with your mom and having this journey, do you think that, and I'll say this, a lot of people look at, let's say, your lack of stability, and they see it as a bad thing. But do you think that it brought out the true hustle in you? Do you think it brought out that do or die factor in you? And do you think that is ultimately contributing to your success you're having today?
I think so. Yeah, and I think my mindset was, and I've always talked about that on podcasts, like I'm 32, I only moved out of my parents. I could only afford to move out of my parents since starting the project January of last year. And I was only able to get a 9-month sublet because I didn't have the pay stubs and receipts. And if they had wanted me to apply, I never would have gotten it because I had no income to show from the years before. And I think I have always had a confidence about it because I was like, to me, it's irrelevant. Like, I'm living with my parents and I don't have money because I'm chasing a dream.
Right.
It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I couldn't be working at Deloitte right now if I wanted to.
Right.
It's because I've chosen a different path for myself. And to me, those were steps that are going to be a difference factor when I'm 40. So I'm not really concerned with what my life looks like at 30.
Right.
It's I want to see what it looks like at 40.
Right.
And those were requirements along the way.
Right. Did you ever doubt your project? Did you ever doubt maybe you took the wrong path?
I've had several times where I was like, I was dumb to think that I could do this full time until the end. And so we were talking about like hardships earlier. So in 2018, when I was living in LA, I had $500 left to my name. And I was lucky that I didn't have to pay rent, but paying gas every week or buying coffees to meet people and groceries and stuff. And that was stressful. And the song, I think it's Up, Up and Away by Kid Cudi.
I'll be up and away. Yep.
At the end, there's like a spoken part, and he says, "The end is never the end." And that became sort of my motto because I was like, what really happens if I hit $0 in my bank account? I have a network of thousands of people that I could reach out to for a part-time job or a full-time job, or I could throw up a GoFundMe as a last option. So it was like, it didn't have to be as scary as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Mentioning that your value comes from the network you have, and your value is your currency, and the path you've taken has ultimately led you to having this extensive network of people. Whereas if you would have stayed in this one job that 95% of people want you to stay in or think you need to have benefits or to have all this shit that keeps you in a box, you taking the chance to jump out of that box and see what happens. And you've gained it, and it's paying off. And I hopefully people see that. This leads into my next question. Building on that network you have, do you have a top 1 or a top 3 people you would love to meet?
So I don't think, I mean, John Bellion is up there. But even that, I'm like, if it happened, cool. If it didn't, just as cool. And I think one of the things I've noticed about myself is I value when other people are excited to be part of the project. Like when people view it as a peer-to-peer experience. Because sometimes I've been introduced to people, whether they were like succeeding in a certain field or something, and I would go in peer-to-peer and they would kind of view me as a journalist. I'm like, I'm not a journalist. I'm doing a project that I'm just trying to meet new people. And they would treat you in a certain way where they're like, well, I'm the talent, you're the journalist. And I would rather sit with someone with no
I've noticed that. And you meet with people who don't have that idea or think of themselves in that way. And there's people who are just, we won't, whatever. But so yeah, I guess also too, like, I guess we can end off with this. So what do you, after you do hit 10,000, what's the next thing?
I think I have what I think it will be, and then I have the understanding that it'll probably look nothing like that because who could have seen COVID coming? So the future is unpredictable, but I see the success that I'm seeing with speaking right now is really encouraging because I think that, like the guy Ben who speaks about the buried life that occurred 10 years ago, I'll be able to speak about my project for a long time. And if I can establish myself and hone my skills over it's going to take like 8 more years to complete the project. Over the next 8 years, then by the time I'm done, I see myself as being able to support myself financially through speaking. I think being a professor at a university and having that course to facilitate connection among students is going to be, like, I want to be the professor that kids are like, oh, well, he's cool because he has the lived experience. Like, I can trust him. and then I want to have a wife and kids. Like hopefully that stuff will happen.
Like a family.
Yeah, before the project concludes. But yeah, I think my focus is just on that stuff. I think I've grown to have more of appreciation for like the wholesome parts of life. Yeah.
And it's interesting because take notes if you're watching this, because you didn't think you were going to be a speaker when you were at person 1, person 2, you know, I'm sure you didn't really understand where you were going to go with it. Now you're at person 5,400 something. You kind of have an idea that you want to be a speaker now. You found this new lane for yourself because you took a chance and started. You didn't know it was going to change. That was going to happen. Or you didn't know that you were going to learn that about yourself. So I feel like anyone who's like going through something or anyone who's trying something new, you don't have to know the end result right away because your life is going to change so much during that. It's all about just starting and just taking that step. And I think you can learn a lot about yourself. And I think you have too. And I've learned a lot just from even talking to you in this short amount of time. What's some advice you would give to someone who may feel like they don't know where to start in life, or they feel like they have a difficult journey between the safety of a job that is comfortable and having a passion and wanting to push for something?
When I was learning from those Weebly guys, the guys that sold their company for $350 million, I feel like they would talk about just work on it on the side. Like you have your work time and then you have your side time. And I would always listen to that and be like, yeah, but no. And then when I started my project, because my routine was I would go to work, I'd do like my 9 to 6 job, I'd come home, I'd have dinner, watch Jeopardy with my roommates and stuff. But then I was like, okay, well, I have to meet someone after work. And then I started finding that I enjoyed those meetings. And it was like, I like that I'm no longer in this post-work routine of just TV, drinks, whatever. I'm doing something that I feel like is adding value to my life. So I learned that my passion for meeting people, and I continued in that. So I would say, do the thing in your off time, but pay attention to whether or not it's filling you up. Because if you're willing to do it in your free time, then you're probably willing to do it at full time at some point. But you have to learn whether or not you're really passionate about it. And you can't learn that without going through the experience. And that's another thing that I'll just say with my project is, and you talk about starting and whatnot. If I had thought of everything I could have thought of for my project before starting it, I would have thought about 5% of what I know now. The other 95% I had to learn just through experience, just through doing, because when you start, you don't know what you don't know, and you just can't shortcut it, unfortunately. You can't figure out what you don't know until you're in that position where you have a problem you need to solve. But then when you solve it, it's like you gain some experience points and you go on and be better in the future.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better myself, Rob. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for giving me your time. And I'm looking forward to you meeting me and whatever. I'm just really happy that you came here today, and because I think what you're doing is unique, and learning your why I think helps me understand why you're doing it, and I love seeing the direction you're going, and hopefully people can take something from this, because this has been a very good episode for me, and I hope. I wish you the best. I'm going to be watching your journey, and when you get to 10K, maybe let me know.
You'll
and
DJ?
Do the celebration. But no, I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm excited for you to reach your goal and see you do great things. So thanks for coming on, Rob.
Yeah, of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching The Loft. If you guys have enjoyed this, please, like I said, like, comment, subscribe. My name is Kevin Nichols. That's Rob Lawless. You've been watching Loft. Peace.